She thought she was boarding a medical relief flight to Boston. But when the jet door closed, she found herself staring into the eyes of a billionaire who had never let a stranger on his plane before. A nurse boards the wrong jet now. She's falling for the billionaire in New York. Welcome to Billionaire Stories Untold. If you enjoy deeply emotional stories of redemption and true love, please subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let us dive into the untold story that changed everything. The sound of rain echoed across the private terminal of JFK Airport as Clara Evans, a 28-year-old nurse from New Jersey, clutched her worn leather bag. She had just finished a 70-hour week at the hospital and was told a corporate jet was waiting to fly her to a last-minute medical conference in Boston. Exhausted but proud, she hurried across the tarmac, guided by a ground crewman pointing toward a gleaming silver Gulfstream. The flight attendant greeted her warmly, calling her by name, and Clara, too tired to notice anything strange, slid into a soft leather seat near the window. The engines hummed, the door sealed, and for the first time in days, she exhaled. Then, the curtain parted. A tall man in a charcoal suit appeared, holding a tablet, his presence commanding yet quiet. His name was Ethan Ward, a billionaire tech investor known for disappearing from headlines as quickly as he entered them. His voice was calm but edged with surprise. "I believe you are on the wrong flight," he said, his gray eyes scanning her nurse badge. Clara blinked, confused. "This is the jet to Boston, right?" "This is the jet to New York City." Her heart sank. She looked out the window. The runway lights were already streaking past. The plane lifted off before she could speak another word. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Then Ethan gave a small, amused sigh, the corner of his mouth curving. "Well, Miss Evans, it seems fate has a strange sense of humor." Embarrassment flushed her cheeks. She fumbled for her phone, but there was no signal. "I am so sorry. I must have mixed up the gate numbers. This has never happened to me." He studied her for a moment, then smiled softly. "Relax. It is only a 2-hour detour. I can have you on the next flight back to Boston." But as the city skyline of New York glittered beneath them, something unexpected stirred. The way he looked at her, curious, intrigued, almost protective, made the small cabin feel smaller, warmer. For the first time in years, Ethan Ward felt his carefully constructed world tilt slightly off its axis. And Clara, despite the chaos of her mistake, could not shake the feeling that this wrong flight might be leading her exactly where she was meant to be. As the plane descended through the clouds toward the glowing city, both of them remained silent, lost in thought, unaware that this single accident was about to rewrite both of their lives. Stay tuned, because this was only the beginning. Let us return now to our main characters. The Gulfstream touched down softly at Teterboro Airport as dawn broke over the New York skyline. Clara Evans pressed her face against the small oval window, her eyes wide. She had only seen New York in television dramas and travel magazines, never through the glass of a private jet. The city shimmered like a sea of gold beneath the first light of morning. When the jet door opened, a driver in a black suit was already waiting beside a sleek Bentley. Ethan Ward stepped out first, his expression unreadable, his phone pressed to his ear. He turned briefly toward her. "You can ride with me. I will drop you at the airport for your return flight," he said in a measured tone before returning to his call. Clara hesitated. Part of her wanted to disappear quietly, to end this embarrassing mix-up, but curiosity tugged at her. She followed him into the car, still clutching her worn nurse's bag like a shield. The car moved smoothly through the quiet streets of Manhattan. Glass towers caught the morning sun, and people rushed by with coffee cups and dreams larger than their pockets. Clara sat still, feeling out of place in her simple blue sweater. Ethan ended his call and looked at her. "So, tell me, Miss Evans, how does a nurse end up on a billionaire's jet?" She smiled nervously. "Pure exhaustion and bad eyesight, apparently." He chuckled for the first time, the sound low and genuine. "That might be the most honest answer I have heard in months." The tension in the car softened. Clara dared to ask, "Do you always travel alone?" His eyes shifted to the skyline. "Always. Easier that way." They stopped outside the Ward Foundation building, a glass tower piercing the clouds. Ethan opened his door, then paused. I have a meeting that cannot be delayed. The next flight to Boston leaves in 3 hours. Why do you not wait upstairs? My assistant will help you book it. Clara hesitated again, but agreed. Inside, the lobby was silent except for the echo of her sneakers against marble floors. She followed his assistant to a private poli. Lounge filled with books, soft lighting, and a view that seemed to float above the city. On the table lay an open file labeled Children's Medical Relief Program. She could not resist reading a few lines, and her heart stopped. The proposal detailed a plan to fund hospitals in rural areas, exactly like the ones where she had volunteered. She recognized one of the clinics mentioned. Her name was listed in a footnote as a local contact. Ethan returned earlier than expected. He found her still standing by the table, the document in her hand. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. You know this project? He asked quietly. I helped start it, she said. We never had enough funding to make it real. Something shifted in his gaze. The usual armor of indifference slipped. Maybe that is about to change. Before she could respond, his phone rang again. He stepped away, leaving her by the window, staring at the skyline that felt impossibly far from her world. Yet somehow, in that room of glass and silence, Clara Evans sensed that her mistaken flight to New York was no accident at all. Their lives had collided by chance, but destiny seemed to be steering the course. And as the morning sun rose higher over Manhattan, both of them began to realize that what started as a fated mistake was about to become something neither could walk away from. Stay tuned for what happens next as their worlds begin to intertwine in ways neither of them expected. The morning stretched into late afternoon, and the skyline outside the Ward Foundation shimmered under the pale autumn sun. Clara Evans stood by the window, lost in thought, when Ethan Ward re-entered the lounge. He had changed into a simple navy sweater, his usual air of control replaced with something quieter. The meeting ended earlier than I expected, he said. Your flight is ready in 2 hours. Until then, would you like to see the city? Clara blinked in surprise. You mean with you? He smiled slightly. It is the least I can do after kidnapping you across state lines. Despite her initial hesitation, curiosity won. Within an hour, they were walking through Central Park, the trees turning amber and gold. Children laughed in the distance, and street musicians played gentle jazz by the fountain. For a moment, Clara forgot about the hospital corridors, the beeping machines, and the exhaustion that had followed her for years. Ethan walked beside her, hands in his pockets, his gaze drifting toward the people rather than the skyline. You seem calm here, he said softly. I am, she replied. Hospitals never stop. Here, it feels like time slows down. He nodded, as if storing her words. I built companies that move too fast. Maybe that is why I forgot what slowing down feels like. They stopped near a vendor selling roasted almonds. Clara bought a small bag, insisting on paying herself. She handed one to him. You do not. Look like someone who eats street food, she teased. He laughed, genuinely this time. I do not. But maybe today I will start. As they crossed a quiet bridge, she noticed the city reflected in the water beneath them. It is beautiful, she said. You live here, but you probably never really see it. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe I was waiting for the right reason to look. The words lingered between them. Neither of them spoke for a while. The breeze brushed through her hair, and for a fleeting second, the noise of the city disappeared. Later that afternoon, Ethan received a call. His tone shifted instantly. The board meeting moved to tonight, he said, his voice low. I need to stay. Clara smiled politely. Then I should get to the airport. You have already done too much. But he shook his head. You cannot leave yet. The relief program we discussed earlier, it will be presented to the board tonight. If you are truly part of it, I want you there. Her eyes widened. Me? I am just a nurse. You are the reason that proposal exists. You understand the heart of it better than anyone. The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. She hesitated, then nodded. All right. I will come, That evening, the boardroom of the Ward Foundation glowed with soft light and tension. Executives whispered in low tones, glancing at Clara with curiosity. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his confidence unshaken. He began the presentation, detailing the medical relief initiative that would bring essential care to children across rural America. When he introduced Clara as one of the program's original field nurses, silence filled the room. She spoke briefly, her voice trembling at first, then growing steady as she described the faces of children who waited hours for a single doctor to arrive. Her words cut through the corporate air like sunlight breaking through clouds. When she finished, there was a rare stillness before the applause began. Ethan met her gaze across the table, and in that moment, neither of them saw the crowd. They only saw each other, two people from different worlds, bound by a mistake that was beginning to look like destiny. As they left the building that night, the city lights reflected in the glass doors like stars beneath their feet. Ethan looked at her and said quietly, "Sometimes the wrong flight is exactly the one you were meant to take." And for the first time since that morning at JFK, Clara believed him. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where the night in New York takes a turn neither of them could have imagined. The boardroom applause still echoed in Clara Evans's mind, long after they left the Ward Foundation. Outside, New York shimmered beneath a velvet sky. The streets pulsed with life, neon lights reflecting on wet pavement from a light evening rain. Ethan Ward walked beside her, silent but present, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You were extraordinary in there," he said at last. His voice was lower now, almost hesitant. "I was terrified, but seeing you believe in that program made it easier." Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You gave them something numbers never could heart." They stopped near Bryant Park. The soft hum of the city surrounded them. A vendor was closing his cart, the smell of coffee drifting through the air. Ethan ordered 2 cups and handed one to her. The simple gesture felt strangely intimate. Clara looked up at the skyline. "Do you ever get tired of this? The meetings, the constant decisions, everyone expecting something from you?" He paused before answering. "Every day, but when I built my company, I thought success would feel like freedom. It does not. It feels like living inside a glass box." She turned to face him. "Then why not step outside it?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I just did." They walked in silence, the only sound their footsteps against the stone walkway. For the first time, Ethan was not the billionaire everyone obeyed, and Clara was not the overworked nurse struggling to make ends meet. They were just 2 people sharing borrowed hours in a city that never slept. Later, as they approached the hotel where she was staying for the night, Ethan stopped. "Clara," he said, his tone shifting, "tomorrow, the Foundation Board will make its final decision on the medical relief program. If they approve it, it will change lives. But if they do not—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. She looked at him carefully. "You are worried they will vote against it." He nodded. "Some of them see no profit in it. They call it charity, not investment." Clara placed a hand on his arm. "Then let them see what it really is. You are investing in people, not numbers." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. "You make things sound simple," he said quietly. "Maybe they are," she replied. The air between them shifted. It was not dramatic, not sudden, but it carried weight, something unspoken that neither of them dared name. Ethan exhaled slowly, almost as if afraid that moving too quickly would break the moment. "Good night, Clara," he said finally. "Good night, Ethan." She watched as he walked away into the glow of the streetlights, his figure fading into the hum of the city. Her heart felt both lighter and heavier at once. The next morning, Clara woke to a knock on her door. A courier stood outside, holding a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten note in Ethan's precise, elegant handwriting. "Meet me at the Foundation at noon. The vote happens today. No matter what they decide, I want you to hear it firsthand. E.W." Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the note. She did not know what would happen, but something deep inside told her this day would change everything. Hours later, as she rode through Manhattan traffic toward the Ward Foundation, Clara glanced out the window. The same city that had felt distant now felt alive around her. Every honking car and flashing light seemed to whisper that destiny was already in motion. Inside the boardroom, powerful men and women waited. Some faces were friendly, others calculating. Ethan stood at the head of the table, calm but resolute. When he saw Clara enter, a subtle warmth crossed his face. For the first time, she realized that his strength did not come from money or control. It came from conviction, and from the courage to care about something real. Whatever the vote would bring, Clara Evans knew this was more than business. It was the moment when two worlds collided not by mistake, but by design. Stay tuned for the next part, where fate delivers a decision that neither of them could predict. The air inside the Ward Foundation boardroom felt heavy with tension. The long mahogany table reflected the glow of the city beyond the tall glass windows. Ethan Ward stood at the head of the table, his posture calm, though the faint lines around his eyes revealed a quiet strain. Across from him sat Clara Evans, her heart pounding as she tried to appear composed among the suits and polished shoes. The board chair cleared his throat. "Mr. Ward, we appreciate your passion for this medical relief project," he said. "But we must consider the return on investment. This proposal, while noble, does not project any measurable financial gain." Ethan's voice was steady but firm. "Not every return can be measured in numbers. Sometimes the investment is in lives." Murmurs spread through the room. Clara watched him, her chest tightening with a mixture of pride and fear. He was risking more than a vote. He was risking credibility, reputation, and trust. One of the older members leaned forward. "The foundation must remain profitable." Ethan met the man's gaze without flinching. "Profit and purpose are not enemies. If we cannot use our success to heal something broken, then what is the point of all this?" For a brief moment, silence followed. Then the board chair announced, "Let us proceed to vote." As the members raised their hands, Clara held her breath. The votes were counted slowly, each second stretching longer than the last. Finally, the chair looked up. "Approved." By a single vote. Clara exhaled sharply, her hands trembling under the table. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then smiled a small, genuine smile that carried more relief than triumph. He turned toward her. "You did this," he said softly. Clara shook her head. "No, you did. You made them believe." He glanced toward the window. "Then maybe you made me believe first." The meeting ended, and the board members filed out with polite nods. When the room was finally empty, Ethan remained by the window, watching the city stretch endlessly below. Clara approached him slowly. "Thank you," she said, "for fighting for something that most people would have walked away from." He looked at her, his expression softening. "Do you know why I fought for it?" She hesitated. "Because it mattered." He shook his head gently. "Because you reminded me that it could." The words hung between them, unguarded and real. For the first time, the distance between billionaire and nurse seemed to dissolve. There was no glass, no pretense, only two people who had found something neither had been looking for. Ethan turned toward her fully now. "I was supposed to fly to London tonight for meetings," he said. "But I canceled them." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled faintly. "Because I thought maybe there is something more important here." Outside, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, slow and silent, against the glass. Clara stepped closer to the window, watching them drift. "It is beautiful," she said. "It is," he replied, though his eyes never left her. They stood together, neither speaking, as the city faded into a blur of white and gold. For the first time, New York felt quiet. Clara finally turned to him. "What happens now?" Ethan's voice was calm, steady. "Now, we build it. The relief network, the hospitals, the future you dreamed about." Her eyes glistened. "And after that?" He took a slow breath. "After that, we will see where this story takes us." The warmth in his words was undeniable. Clara felt her heart stumble, not from fear but from something she had not let herself feel in years' hope. As the snow thickened, the city lights glowed softer, almost magical. In that moment, both of them knew the wrong flight had carried them exactly where they were meant to be. Stay tuned for the next part, where the line between destiny and desire begins to blur. The first snow of winter drifted over Manhattan like a quiet curtain, softening the noise of the city. Inside Ethan Ward's penthouse, the world felt still. The glass walls framed the skyline, and the faint glow from the fireplace reflected across the polished floor. Clara Evans stood near the window, watching the snow settle on the ledge. It had been 3 days since the board approved the medical relief program, and in those 3 days, her world had changed in ways she could barely understand. Ethan walked in from the adjoining room, a steaming mug of coffee in each hand. He offered one to her without a word. She took it, their fingers brushing for just a moment longer than necessary. "Are you sure this is not too much?" Clara asked quietly. "The press is already talking about how you turned your foundation into a charity." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let them talk. For once, I am not chasing headlines. I am chasing something that feels real." Clara turned toward him, searching his expression. "You sound different lately." He looked down at his coffee. "Maybe I am. I have spent my whole life building walls between me and everyone else. You somehow walked right through them without even trying." Her voice softened. "Maybe because I was not looking for your walls. I was just looking for the person behind them." For a moment, silence filled the room. The city stretched beneath them, a sea of lights, alive but far away. Ethan set his cup down and stepped closer. "Clara," he said, his voice low, almost careful. "When you first stepped onto my jet, I thought you were just another disruption. Now, I think that mistake was the best thing that ever happened to me." Her breath caught. She wanted to respond, but words felt too small for what she was feeling. She met his eyes instead, and the quiet between them said everything. The moment was interrupted by a soft chime from Ethan's phone. He frowned as he read the message, his expression darkening. "It is the board again," he said. "They are reconsidering the funding terms. One of the investors is pulling out." Clara's heart sank. "After everything you said? After all that work?" He nodded. "They think the project is too idealistic. They want to replace it with something that guarantees profit." Clara stepped closer, determination flaring in her eyes. "Then we fight again. You showed them once what it means to believe. You can do it again." He looked at her, studying her resolve, then smiled faintly. "You have a way of making impossible things sound certain." "Because I have seen you do the impossible," she said. "You are just afraid to admit that you care." Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. Ethan did not respond immediately. Instead, he turned toward the window, watching the snow swirl against the glass. "Caring gets you hurt," he said quietly. "When you have everything, people stop seeing you. They only see what you can give them." Clara stepped beside him. "Then maybe it is time you find someone who sees you for who you really are." He turned toward her then, and for a moment, the distance between them vanished. His gaze softened, the steel in his posture giving way to something fragile. "And that person is you?" he asked, not as a challenge, but as a confession. Clara did not move. She did not need to. The answer was already in her eyes. Outside, the city shimmered under the falling snow, and in that quiet moment, two people who had never believed in fate began to understand that some mistakes are written by destiny itself. The deepest secrets are about to change everything. Subscribe now to catch the dramatic twist that is coming in the next chapter. The next morning arrived with gray clouds over New York, and the city carried a restless hum that matched the tension in Ethan Ward's office. Clara Evans stood beside the wide window, staring down at the traffic far below. She could hear Ethan's voice through the glass door of the conference room. It was calm but sharp, the tone of a man fighting a battle that was slipping out of his control. The board had called an emergency meeting. One of the major investors had officially withdrawn from the relief program, and the others were wavering. Ethan had spent the last 2 hours trying to hold the project together. When he finally walked out, his expression was grim. He loosened his tie, his shoulders heavy. Clara stepped forward. "What happened?" "They froze the funding," he said quietly. "Until they find a replacement investor." Clara's eyes widened. "But that could take months." The clinics will not survive that long. Ethan nodded. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through his composure. They think I am letting emotions run the business. They think you are the reason I have lost focus. Clara took a step back. Me? He looked at her with regret. They said, ever since you appeared, I have been distracted. They called this whole project a sentimental distraction. For a moment, she did not speak. The words cut deeper than she expected. So what will you do? I told them they were wrong, he said firmly. But they want results, not faith. Silence filled the room. The snow outside had stopped, leaving only the cold reflection of the clouds across the glass. Clara turned away, her voice trembling. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am the distraction. Ethan moved closer. Do not say that. But it is true, she said softly. Before me, you were untouchable. Now, everything you built is shaking. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. Clara, he said quietly, what I built was empty before you. If this is what it takes to find something real, then let it fall apart. Her eyes filled with tears. You cannot lose everything because of me. He shook his head. Maybe losing everything is how I finally find myself. For a long moment they stood facing each other in silence, two people caught between reason and something much stronger. Outside, the gray sky deepened. The city continued moving, unaware that somewhere above it, love and fear were colliding. Neither of them knew that the next decision they made would test everything, their beliefs, their strength, and the fragile bond that was beginning to mean more than either of them could admit. Stay tuned for part 3, where the truth behind the betrayal inside the foundation will finally come to light. The following evening, the Ward Foundation building stood quiet, its offices mostly dark, except for the faint light coming from Ethan Ward's corner suite. Clara Evans stood at his desk, reading through the files he had left open. Numbers, reports, and funding statements filled the pages. But something caught her attention, a transaction that did not belong. Her eyes narrowed as she traced the details. A hidden withdrawal of several $1 million from the relief fund, redirected to a private account under the name of one of the board members, Thomas Reed. Clara's pulse quickened. It was not an investor pulling out, it was betrayal from within. The door opened behind her. Ethan stepped in, looking exhausted, his tie loosened. Clara, you should not be here this late, he said. She turned to him, holding up the document. Ethan, you need to see this. Someone inside your foundation is stealing from you. He frowned, crossing the room to take the paper. As he scanned it, his expression darkened. Thomas Reed, he said under his breath. He was the one who convinced the others to freeze the funding. Clara nodded. He did not lose confidence in the project. He sabotaged it. Ethan's jaw tightened. And for the first time, the calm in his voice broke. He has been with me since the beginning. I trusted. Clara placed a hand on his arm. You can still fix this, but you cannot do it alone. He looked at her, 1,000 thoughts flashing behind his eyes. You knew something was wrong, did you not? I felt it, she said. People like him do not see what you are trying to do. They only see what they can take. Ethan turned to the window, the city glowing beneath him. All these years I thought betrayal came from competitors or the press. I never thought it would come from inside my own circle. Then maybe this is your chance, Clara said softly. Not to rebuild what you had, but to build something better with people who believe in it. He met her gaze, the anger in his eyes slowly giving way to clarity. You are right, he said. If Reed did this, he will answer for it. At that moment, his phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. He is meeting a potential buyer for the stolen shares tonight. Midtown Hotel. Clara's eyes widened. Then you have to stop him. Ethan nodded, already reaching for his coat. And I am not going alone. Clara hesitated only for a second before following him out the door. As the elevator descended, the city lights blurred behind the glass. Two people, one fueled by justice, the other by conviction, were about to walk into a truth that could destroy everything or finally set them free. Neither of them knew that tonight, the Foundation's secrets would not be the only ones exposed. Stay tuned for Part 3, where the confrontation will change their lives forever. The Midtown Hotel glimmered beneath a cold winter sky, its glass doors reflecting the blur of passing cars. Inside, Ethan Ward and Clara Evans moved through the marble lobby with quiet determination. Every step echoed with tension. Ethan's eyes were fixed ahead, his jaw set. Clara followed close behind, clutching the evidence file that could destroy Thomas Reed's career or save the foundation. They found Reed in the private bar on the second floor, seated across from a man in a dark suit. 2 glasses of whiskey sat untouched between them. Ethan stopped at the doorway, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You picked the wrong night to sell your lies, Thomas." Reed froze, his face paling as Ethan approached. "Ethan," he said quickly, forcing a smile, "you do not understand this is business." "This is theft," Ethan interrupted. He placed the file on the table, flipping it open. "You diverted $3 million from a relief fund meant to save children's lives. How much did your conscience cost you?" The buyer rose silently and walked away, leaving Reed alone under the harsh light. Clara stood beside Ethan, her voice firm. "We have everything documented. You cannot bury this." Reed's composure crumbled. "You would destroy me for this," he whispered. Ethan's tone was quiet but final. "No, you destroyed yourself." Security arrived moments later. As they escorted Reed out, the tension that had gripped the room began to lift. Ethan turned toward Clara, his expression weary but relieved. "It is over," he said. Clara shook her head softly. "No, it is beginning. You can rebuild the foundation now the right way." He looked at her for a long moment, as if seeing her for the first time again. "You came into my life by accident, and yet you became the only thing that feels deliberate." Clara smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Maybe that is what fate really is, not perfection, just timing." They walked out of the hotel together, the city lights stretching endlessly ahead. Snow began to fall again, soft and endless, as if the night itself was exhaling. Ethan stopped under a street lamp and turned to her. "When this started, I thought I was saving you from a mistake," he said. "But maybe you were the one saving me." Clara met his gaze, her voice steady. "Maybe we saved each other." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining as the snowflakes fell between them. The cold air carried a quiet promise, the kind that does not need to be spoken to be believed. In the distance, New York shimmered, alive with possibility. The story that began with a mistake had become something far greater, a reminder that even in a world built on power and precision, love remains the most unpredictable empire of all. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold or real stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.